Welcome. So we have a lot going on today. Our guest today is Jonny Rosenblatt, co-founder at Spacemade in the UK. And Johnny's going to share about his portfolio and his co-working story and all those things. But first, we have a special co-host today who has been a two-timer on the podcast already. So this is technically what's it called? Your hat trick.
It's my hat trick. It's totally
Your
my
hat
hat trick.
trick. Yeah.
I love it. I love the hockey reference, Jamie. That's great.
Oh no, it's a soccer or football reference.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
I guess anytime there's a goal involved,
Definitely.
we'll call it a.
Definitely a football reference. Yeah.
Yes, that's where I was coming from. I'm glad it works as a Canadian hockey reference also. Okay, well, so Kane is a surprised co-host. Geo ambushed me, as Kane said. So, although it's funny, well, Jonny, I don't know if you have these yet, but so I live just south of San Francisco, but in one of those like dense suburbs, it's like 20,000 people, but I live way up in the hills, which is nice because we have a nice view, but it's just kind of quiet. But I was walking my dogs the last 2 days and I got passed by a Waymo early in the morning twice. And I was like, I was trying to pull my phone out to take a picture for Kane. Kane's obsessed with Waymos. Do you have self-driving cars in the UK yet, Jonny?
They've not yet hit here, actually. I think LA seems to be the testing ground for it. So as long as it can survive LA traffic, then I guess it works anywhere else in the world, right?
I don't know. Are they in LA yet? So Kane got to try one in Phoenix because we were in Phoenix for the GWA conference. So they seem to be testing them there. And then here, because we're in San Francisco, which is, tech capital, they're for sure here. I haven't been in one yet, but
you haven't been in one, Jamie? Oh my God.
No, I know. And I'm like, who's driving? Like yesterday, I actually think there was a guy in one. And so I was like, maybe I have a neighbor who works for Waymo. Like that's possible. So it looked like somebody was driving, but I don't know for sure. It was hard to tell.
Yeah, Jonny. Oh, you've already heard me gush about it, Jonny. It is like stepping into the future. You're literally the car pulls up. There's no driver. The handles just like come out by themselves. You hop into the car. You click on the little screen, say yes, let's go, and the car drives. There's no one in the driver's seat, but the wheels like turning around. It's the craziest experience. It feels surreal. But it was amazing. I think I took maybe 7 of them in the 4 days that I was in Phoenix. It was amazing. You got to try it when you're in one of those towns.
Awesome. That sounds great. Do you remember the Jetsons?
Yeah.
Back in the day, TV show. It feels like
Jonny, you can't be old enough to know about the Jetsons. I don't buy in.
We're all we'll show our age here, but yeah, not really a reference for your listeners, I don't reckon. But hey.
Yeah, most of our listeners probably know the Jetsons, I think. Jonny, I was convinced you'd been on the podcast before. You haven't been on either podcast. It must be just we did the Office R&D Flex World conference.
That's right.
That must be where I've seen your podcast studio. So I'm so excited for this. Okay. And you got to hang out at Juicy UK. Did either of you go to Sofia?
I was in Sofia. I've just been to Sofia for Coworking Europe. Yeah, it was a super interesting trip. Like the European co-working market is really exciting. There's a lot going on. Like, Europe is pretty vast and very different jurisdictions. So there's lots of different things happening in different countries, but putting it together, as always, Jonny does a brilliant job of it. And it was a great conference. Really, really interesting, really exciting, and great to be somewhere. Well, certainly I've never been to Sofia.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to go just because. Yeah. Incredible. Kane, I thought you were going for some reason.
I had to go. I had to bail last minute. Actually, I ended up having a conflict. But yes, it was in my travel schedule. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to go. I'm curious, Jonny, because when we go, and Jamie mentioned this as well, when we go to London, it just, again, like using the Waymo reference, in some ways it feels like you're jumping into the future of co-working relative to most of the US markets, right? Did you see any spaces when you were in Sofia, or did you talk to any operators that you thought, wow, these guys are really dialed, they're doing something really different? Was there anything that really wowed you at the conference in that way?
Yeah. So I did see a few spaces in Sofia, and they're really interesting. There were a couple that, I was like super surprised that, the kind of the advancements, the quality, actually what's on offer. And then I guess across Europe, I think people are doing so many different things. There's so much happening in terms of like, I suppose a bit of consolidation's happening in the market across Europe. There's a lot happening on the management agreement side by the sounds of things across various different countries. So it works really well in certain countries. So it seems like, I know obviously UK, and I can talk about that if you want to touch on that a bit later, but certainly in France, in Netherlands, there seems to be this kind of proliferation of management agreements as a way forward over this kind of leasehold model. Whereas some countries, it's almost impossible. Like it's become very, very difficult to do them. So there's lots of different kind of hurdles that need to be overcome across the different jurisdictions in Europe. But actually, I think what I found really interesting, and this is something I know, Kane, you and I have talked about this in the past, and something we're looking at as Spacemade, but seems to be a really interesting kind of conference trend that you see is that actually the kind of advent of AI and the take up of AI across the co-working community seems to be really accelerating very, very quickly. And so that was quite a big sort of, AI presence at Co-working Europe. And I think it's a massive growth area. It's a growth area for every business in every walk of life. But I think that the use cases for co-working are, plentiful. And there are so many ways in which we can actually, accelerate what we do, make stuff more efficient through the use of AI. So that was quite an interesting trend that seemed to be developing actually.
Yeah. Did you see? Yeah. I was talking with Francesco about that on the sales side, but did you see anything on the ops side? Like, I think that's interesting, right, Jamie? Like,
that's what I was curious. Like, outside of Francesco's solution, what did you see?
So there are a bunch of solutions probably tackling the most obvious point, which is kind of, as you say, on the sales side. And, like to elaborate on that a little bit, that's really more about kind of, actually lead qualification, processing sort of the inquiries that we get on a daily basis, the questions that we get on a daily basis. There's different ways of doing that, whether that's by email, by voice, the various kind of elements of it. From an operational perspective, I think it feels like the sales piece is like the entry point for most people to kind of get comfortable with it, to get familiar with it. And I think we're probably all in a position where, as operators anyway, where we're keen to kind of embed this into our business to make things easier, to make things more efficient. And that seems like the kind of the lowest hurdle and the kind of easiest way of doing it. For us as a business, we kind of process, about, give or take, on average about 1,000 to 1,200 leads on a monthly basis. And, there's a lot of process that goes with that, but in effect, that relies on, our central sales team processing each and every one of them, qualifying them, and then putting it in the right pipeline so that it kind of goes into the right sales process. And so, actually, if you can enhance that experience through use of AI, you can find a way in which it frees up those central salespeople to do things, much more proactive and engaging, to kind of build those connections with leads so that it helps them become members quicker and in a more engaged way. And so that, for me, that's the kind of really exciting piece of the jigsaw.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm actually rereading a book right now. It's called Sales Management Simplified. It's very good for talking about, one of the big takeaways is that a sales manager and a salesperson couldn't be two more different people in terms of skill sets, what they can do, like where their best uses of time are, which is really interesting. But then it goes through like basically how to manage sales and the sales team and all this sort of thing, which I think is interesting. And so I'm rereading that right now. But one of the things that I think is a tremendous opportunity on the ops side, of course, on the lead side, yes. But then on the ops side, if you were able to take some of the admin off of the sales team, like that would be the peanut butter and chocolate, because you've got a salesperson that is just awesome when they're standing in front of somebody, right? Or when they're negotiating a deal, but like entering into HubSpot, spending 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day entering into HubSpot to get it up to date. And we need this information, right? But optimizing that process so that your salespeople can just spend entirely their time, as much so, or optimizing their time anyway, in front of the client, I think would be huge. I'm not exactly sure how it how that would work. But I think HubSpot's, they've already got an AI piece, and like maybe some of that's coming. Did you see anything like that in terms of like companies talking about optimizing operations in that way?
No, not really, not really. But I think you're right. That kind of actually, we're HubSpot users as well as our CRM, and actually, that piece of the jigsaw is the key element. If you can find a way, and as you say, like sales managers or salespeople, tend to enjoy the sale, right? And they're not that keen on the sort of, I'm generalizing, of course, but like that kind of data entry play. But any system that you implement is only as good as the data that feeds into it.
Right.
So actually that becomes an education piece for the whole business. I just think it's a really interesting kind of journey for the sector as a whole, because, we can all say, oh, we're going to implement AI into our business. But firstly, it's how, and it's about you getting the right use cases. But then really, it's about educating the entire business really to kind of hone in on their skills so that actually we're making best use of AI. We're making best use of the technology inputs, and then actually everyone's well trained and well versed on delivering that. Because, how many projects have we all been involved with over the years where actually it's a really great idea, but actually the execution is the key, right? Like if people are not going to feed into it, then it's never going to work, and you need everyone on board. And I think that's a kind of another challenge that we're all going to face as we kind of incorporate more and more AI and more technology play into the wider business and the operational side and the sales side. That actually means we've all got to kind of, I suppose, re-educate our teams and ensure that everyone's on board with these systems. Is kind of, not the most exciting piece, but actually that's what our business is about. Everyone's got to be on board. Everyone's got to be focused on that one direction. And if you're not, then the whole system kind of falls down, actually.
It's a big, right out of undergrad, I worked for Accenture in their change management group, which sounds like so squishy and so like, but it's exactly what you're talking about, kind of even at a micro level, is whenever you make these changes, even when you adopt a CRM, right? It's like, well, if the team doesn't use it, like the change management from like, well, I just do everything in email or, in spreadsheets, and then the systematizing of all that, they don't use it, and you can't get the team on board or, get the implementation done so you can move on to the bigger things. It doesn't work. But the same thing, Kate, you were talking about the peanut butter and the chocolate of the sales side. I mean, same things for like the ops side and like member interactions, right? If you can automate more of like member onboarding and all those things that take a team so much admin time, and they could be interacting with members and engaging and connecting, that can make a big difference too. So yeah, interesting. I'm curious, Liz Elon posted after the conference, she made some comment about like no new concepts, like that she saw, sort of in Europe. And I was like, what does she mean by that? Does she just mean like nothing new and unusual happening? Or what was your kind of takeaway on?
I mean, I don't know. I had a good catch up with Liz as I always do when I see her. And actually, that comment, I mean, I don't know what she, overall what she saw. I know we as a business are kind of driving new concept at the moment. And actually, this is, I think, a direction of travel that I see in the industry as we kind of evolve and mature. And, actually, London market, as we kind of know, is probably the most mature of all co-working markets globally. And so that maturity leads to advancements in what we're doing. And for us, actually, that kind of new concept development actually really is around building kind of much more industry specific brands. So actually last 2 weeks ago, we announced a project we've been working on for best part of a year, but this is a project that focuses on the health tech market solely. So this is a big project, central London, Portland Place, which is kind of heart of Marylebone, which is pretty core central London. We're delivering 40,000 square feet of space for professionals solely in the health tech arena. And I think it's a really interesting one because so firstly, it's a partnership, as all our schemes are. They're partnerships with landlords. The landlord here in question is the Howard de Walden estate, who own pretty much all of Marylebone and a really major landowner in central London. And actually, this was driven by what they see, which is that the core of, or one core of their kind of portfolio is healthcare. So you may well have heard of Harley Street, which is kind of, the center of the healthcare world. It's kind of got an interesting brand around it. And it's been something that has been for over 100 years, this kind of center of healthcare and of healthcare excellence. They also have an extensive office portfolio. We manage and run a number of sites there. In fact, Kane, I met you there about a month ago, and we run a few sites across their office portfolio. But what they would see was that they've got this kind of healthcare and this healthcare kind of occupier market, as well as the sort of traditional office market. And that is a market, really across the board, but a lot of investors, a lot of kind of private equity businesses. And the vision that we're implementing with them is that, can we create this new dynamic where these health tech businesses, which is such a, but I mean, to say it's a burgeoning sector is an understatement. I mean, it's a massive, massive sector. There's no real hub in London for the health tech community, but given the relationships that between us and them exist within the healthcare world, actually, how do we facilitate this kind of incredible network of 3 buildings at sort of a campus across Portland Place? And how do we deliver this kind of incredibly interesting world? And why I think this is a really interesting dynamic for the kind of the co-working sector is because, we as operators are really good at building communities, at, connecting people, at bringing people together. As Spacemade, we're obsessed with building meaningful connections. And we're very good at doing that, right? But actually, how do you build a community within a community? That becomes a whole other jigsaw. And I think the skill sets are perfectly placed to go and deliver that within the co-working world. For us, we build brands on a pretty, on an individual basis. So every site we have has its own individual brand. It has its own partnership with its own landlord. And actually, we think we're very well placed to go and deliver those sorts of offerings because, we build something very specific to that market. And so the product that we're building is specific, but actually the brand that we've built around it is specific to health tech. And it means we can go and put in, sort of dry labs and screening rooms and event spaces and cafes and curate very, very specific events around this health tech community. And so, that I think is quite an exciting development that we're kind of seeing more and more of. We will next year, we'll announce another kind of sector specific scheme that we're doing. But actually, I think this is a sort of a driving force as we evolve as an industry. I think it's kind of a super interesting sort of next stage of evolution.
That is really interesting. How much input did you have on the design of that? Like you're talking about wet labs, you're talking about stuff dry labs. You're talking about some elements of this space that's very specific to that industry. Did you come in to look at, I always think about, just monetizing space in terms of looking at how do I put a plan together, natural light, that's worth more than my interior office, all those sort of things. Were you involved in that planning stage where you're like, we want to put a dry lab over here, we want to locate a kitchen there, here's how we optimize the space?
100%. Yeah, 100%. The bulk of the space still remains the core business, which is private offices, co-working, meeting rooms, event space, cafe, and then there are amenities that kind of sit around that. But we were really, really kind of heavily involved. We have our own in-house design team, project manager, and actually, but it's an extensive project. And so we worked alongside we're still working alongside a really brilliant architect practice. So we fed in the initial designs, the concept, the kind of the layouts, what the priorities are, all the usual stuff around kind of actually what are the core pieces that we need as an operation to make it work, which frankly, it doesn't matter how good an architect practice is, they don't know because that's our world and that's what we all kind of do as operators. So we fed in all of that information, the right kit that we need, the right equipment. And then actually we've been working incredibly collaboratively across that process over the last, 12 months really, as we built this project out. So launch is March 2025. And, it's incredibly exciting. We brought we've already kind of brought in our sort of anchor tenant who are a pretty major player in the health tech market. and they're taking a good chunk of space. And so, actually building out that community around the right people, that's pivotal. And
so more of an ecosystem. I mean, you're creating not just a community, but an ecosystem with the right sort of players present to make it
exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, and actually, look, the reality is, we as operators, we will never pretend to be experts in the health tech world. Like, I mean, we can't be. We would get exposed very quickly. We've done a lot of work. We understand what we understand, but actually, for us, we see ourselves as facilitators of that. How do we, as operators and facilitators, enhance that world so that those connections with the right people in the room or in the space can be made? And how do we ensure those connections do get made on, at the right time? So that's really our job. And it's a curation piece, but, for me, for any of my team to sort of dictate to the health tech community, what health tech should be or what they should be doing, no, that's none of that's happening. But we have a really important role to play in kind of curating that world and creating that community. So I think it's like this kind of perfect marriage of kind of what's required in that market, working with the landlord who understands that market incredibly well, bringing in the right people, and then allowing that community to happen, organically, but with a sort of, I guess, with a little nudge from us in the background just to make sure that we're getting the right people together. So it's really exciting. We're enjoying this one actually a lot.
And March, like that is literally a blink away, and you're going to be opening that center. That is,
yeah. It's very soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonny, you haven't told us about your operation. Jamie and I, we know, but for the listeners, tell us about Spacemade. Tell us, the vision you had going into Spacemade, why you created it in the way you have, why you structure transactions in the way you do, and what makes your operations different than most operators.
Okay, so just a bit of background, but before starting Spacemade, so Spacemade started in December 2019. But before starting that, I ran and founded and operated a business called Headspace Group, which was, I guess sort of, the rent arbitrage model of co-working, right? I had a brand, we take leases on spaces, and, our profit was really that kind of arbitrage between the fixed costs and what we could generate in desk rates. Great business. I loved it. It was a real kind of labor of love, and actually, it proved to be really successful. And in kind of late 2017, I sold it to, a larger operator in London called BE Offices, who took it over. And, it was an incredible journey, an incredible learning curve. What sort of started to happen after that was that I spent most of my time having kind of taken a bit of time out. But once I was like ready to do stuff, and once my wife was ready to get me out the house again, I spent most of my time fielding calls from landlords saying, I want to do the WeWork thing. I need to kind of create a kind of a product that that can resonate with the market. And what was starting to happen, if you remember, it was happening across the US as well, but traditional landlords, traditional real estate was getting eaten by the flex industry, and actually it was becoming more and more difficult to do the kind of traditional way of operating, which was nice Cat finish, stick it on the market, wait for someone to come and spend all the money and kind of take a 10-year lease. That was becoming more difficult, and landlords were starting to wake up to the idea that actually the market was changing, lease lengths were shortening, commitments were changing, TIs were changing. There was a lot happening. So I was getting a lot of calls from people. I then actually sort of met my now business partner, Dan, who was sort of in that landlord market. And we sort of realized there was this kind of big role to play for an operator who might open up their kind of operation to a landlord to say, look, we will go and create a product for you that works for your building, your portfolio, whatever, a flaw in your asset. Create a brand, create a product, deliver it, and then operate it, on a lengthy management agreement. And so that's what we did. And we opened our first space in December 2019. Obviously, 3 months later, the whole world was told never go to the office again. So the timing of that was you learn the hard way sometimes. But But actually what became apparent to us in terms of the journey was that, lockdown happened and that was March 2020. We had a space ready to go that was actually in one of the kind of a really cool London suburb by chance. But what was happening was we were getting daily calls or emails or people actually turning up at the space saying, we'd like to we've got to get out of the house. We need to do something. So June, July 2020, we opened that space and soon became this kind of trend of sort of close to home working, which I think was a really interesting trend and, something we have kind of continued to deliver amongst kind of, more central locations as well. And so over time, we built a portfolio of about 250,000 square feet in London, in Leeds, and in Birmingham. So majority are in London and one site in Leeds and one in Birmingham. And as of March, will be 15 buildings. And we've kind of evolved, I suppose, from the landlord partners who initially were kind of entrepreneurial, early adopters, people that, we kind of maybe either knew or knew of us and had, understood and wanted to take a chance on us because they believed in us. So now, predominantly institutional investors, landed estates like the Howard Walden estate, and serious property companies who want to go and deliver something because it's not a reactionary play. It is actually a strategic move to bring flex into a building or into a kind of portfolio because they know they have to go and deliver it. This is no longer about, I can't fill my building, which it probably was straight off the back of COVID. This is about, this is essential to go and deliver to ensure we drive revenues from the flex space, but actually to improve our wider asset as well, because flex as an amenity for a kind of traditional leasehold model is critical. And so that's what's really happened. And everything we do is via a management agreement. There are many ways of cutting management agreements, as you guys know. I had it described to me recently by a pretty leading agent in London that our management agreement is probably the most landlord-friendly version that you can find in London. And we're pretty clear about what we do, about the terms of our management agreement. We tend not to deviate from it, particularly. We stand our ground because actually we're really clear that, these are pure management agreements. They need to be very friendly to the landlord. They need to be driven by kind of some line NOI, none of this kind of top line because there's no alignment there. And I think landlords need to be really aware of that, anyone coming in and just basically solely doing top line, that's a slightly dangerous game. And so, we need to be very heavily aligned. We see it generally as totally as a partnership, and it's become really institutionally accepted, I think, in the UK market. I know like probably pre-COVID, London's sort of the share of deals that were done that were management agreements were about 9% of the London market. I think today they're getting close to about 50% of deals that are happening. So it's huge, right? And there's lots.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's the way forward because institutions are accepting it because there's an understanding that you have to go and deliver space differently. The old business model of real estate, it doesn't work anymore because it was contingent on long leases, right? It works if you get a kind of,
a particular demand model, and that's totally changed. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Lease lengths are tiny now. We find we do longer license agreements. Our members stay longer than the traditional lease length that you would get on a traditional basis. So, there's something amiss in that traditional market. And I think a lot of the landlord market has woken up to it. And so, we see ourselves almost as a service provider to do that in partnership with landlords.
Yeah, it's so interesting how far ahead London is, right, Jamie?
Yeah.
Like, all the landlords you talk to, all the operators you talk to that are out there trying to do management agreements. Jonny, I'm curious how you crafted the term. So you said yours is very friendly to the landlord, right? Which probably presupposes that it's not that friendly to your circumstance, right? And when you crafted that agreement, did you take it from another agreement and just make it more friendly, or like, what was the journey of putting that agreement together?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Actually, we didn't take any kind of template, which tends to be like the rule of thumb, right? You take something that, a lawyer is sent you and you then kind of work it around that. We intentionally, Dan and I started with a really clean slate. We were like, here is what we believe, a landlord would want out of an agreement. Here is what we need out of an agreement. Yeah. And we put it together and we worked with a really strong kind of, corporate lawyer to develop a very clear management agreement. But those principles remain the same. For us, it's really important that a landlord has control of their asset because, actually fundamentally, whilst we are wholly focused on the flex element and we're very obsessive about it, they have a vision of what they wanted to go and do with it. They might want to sell it in 5 years. They might want to sell it unencumbered by the flex. That's fine. That's their asset. Actually, if you build a management agreement which basically restricts them from doing maybe what they want to do longer term with the asset, it might feel great for you as an operator that you've kind of like got this security, but you're going to have there's going to be some friction along the way. And so for us, actually, that partnership is really key. We do something, I suppose, slightly different in that the direct legal relationship with the kind of members, the end user, everything is looked after by us, everything is care of us. But in the legal document, it is direct with the landlord. And the reason we do that is, again, because I think landlords have been burnt time and time again by probably slightly more kind of these, rent arbitrage operations that have put, assets into SPVs. And then when times get tough, they clear out the building and actually like there's nothing left in the SPV and they hand back the keys. And, we've all seen this happen, right? With larger scale operators that have done this. I think, that might be, often in the industry, we dismiss that as, oh, that's, large operator, unnamed, but that's what happens. But actually what that does is it causes a really negative impression for the landlord market of the industry as a whole. And so, for us, kind of giving that direct relationship is really important. We're also like transparency is critical. So we have really, really clear reporting structures with our landlords. They have access to a dashboard that updates on a daily basis. So they can see the tenancy schedule every day that it changes. They can see occupancy levels. They can see how we're tracking against the budget that we set out at the beginning of the project. They can see all of these metrics because actually they feel connected with it. And so for us as an operator, that's great because yes, they might see, when something might be underperforming, but equally they see when things are doing really well. And most of these things are performing well rather than underperforming. But you don't want to share.
Whose cell phone are they calling when they don't like what they see?
It happened. That's the reality of it, right? It's business. Business is never straightforward. And so, sometimes there are issues, but we would much rather be upfront with our landlord partners straight away and say, well, look, this is happening. This is a trend that's happening in the market. We have a whole load of competition that's open on our doorstep doing soft deals. So we need to adjust accordingly. And I think our landlord partners appreciate that on a much better level because they understand that actually this is real life. This is operational real estate. Like it fluctuates, markets move, things happen, and you have to react. If you're basically sending them a quarterly report, which is kind of a bunch of like ledgers, at the end of each quarter, like it's too late. It's too late. What happened 3 months ago. And in our world, as we all know, 3 months is quite a long time. Like things move on significantly. So, for us, that kind of transparency, that openness with our landlord partners, that direct relationship, that's the stuff that makes it kind of landlord friendly. And we always say to our landlords, like, it's got to work for you and it's got to work for us. And if we can find that middle ground, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And these are long-term relationships. We're not fly-by-night operators. We're not here to do a quick deal and then, disappear. We're here for the long haul. And these are 10, 15-year relationships. Like they've got to be built on solid foundations. And so for us, that's like incredibly important to what we deliver.
Kane, one of the, I feel like the tone that I'm getting from Jonny is just very collaborative and very forward-looking and intentional by the asset owner. Whereas I don't know if Canada's like this. The sense I get in the US is it's still a little more adversity. Maybe not adversity, but like still not on the same side of the table exactly in terms of approaching these agreements. Like I just feel this sense of like confidence and comfort from you that like, look, and I'm guessing you're picking locations that will work, right? You're not so desperate to do a management deal that it's a little risky and that dashboard could totally, get you the phone calls, every Monday morning. Like, why are the numbers looking like this? It just feels like you're just, there's no scarcity mindset. Like we're going to pick the assets that work. We're going to pick the best partners, and you're in a macroeconomic environment from a real estate perspective that's kind of supporting that. I feel like we're still kind of behind that real partnership, innovative mindset that like supports that win-win. And maybe it's some of the players in the industry. I mean, there's a couple, you talk about the top line revenue and that we need to close this deal, like not partner, oriented. I don't know. It just feels like a totally different tone. Kate, I'm curious what your perspective is.
Yeah. As I was listening to you, Jonny, I was thinking about, as the operator, I've talked to a lot of operators, as we all have, about these the management agreements. And one of the things is, what about the termination clause? And what happens if, like you're trying to kind of, like, when you think about it from a lease, you want to cover off all your downsides in terms of like making sure that they don't have a competitor coming into the building and making sure that, there's a cap on operating costs potentially, or maybe onto the gross up or these sort of things, right? So it's changing a mindset to think more. Like when I listen to Jonny, I'm thinking about, when you look at sales books, they talk about relationships. Like, are you looking for deep relationships, or are you looking for thin and wide? Are you trying to be something to everybody? Or like, from what Jonny's saying, it's like, no, these are deep relationships built on a foundation of trust. And at the end of the day, this is not about this one deal. This is about a relationship that's ongoing. And at the end of the day, and if there's one of these situations where something terminates and it didn't work out in your favor, that's okay, because, it worked out likely in the landlord's favor as a result of that. And that's further strengthening a relationship. I just feel like that's the way you operate, Jonny. And is that really your mantra? You're really looking for or finding those relationships where you want to go deeper and build those foundations and really focus on those?
Yeah, I think that is right. Look, I think we go through, we've got a good reputation in the London market and the UK market. And so we see a lot of deals. And I think a lot of what you said, both of you actually, on this, is still true of us. We still do sit in these conversations where, landlord is kind of saying, oh, well, on a lease, I'd be getting this, or I need you to take these lease obligations, or, these situations are important. And we have to kind of, work through some of those. Very often, for the most part, we end up saying no to deals, or we don't do these deals. We see infinitely more deals than we do, right? But you've got to be more selective. And look, I think we're in a position now where we can be more selective. Early days, yeah, you're trying to build a business, and you're an operator, you're a co-working operator. You can't be a co-working operator if you haven't got any spaces. So you have to be more, you have to give it a bit of a shot early on. So, I'm not going to pretend that like everything's gone swimmingly at all, because it hasn't. But actually now, as the deals get more sophisticated, as the partners get more sophisticated, the way we can deliver space gets more sophisticated, and we can do more interesting projects. And so we can be more selective at that point. I think you've got to be, as an operator, you've got to, stay true to, I guess, your core values of what you want to do. And for us, there are some really core values in those kind of, those relationships. We talk about it mainly from a member perspective, but, our whole business is focused on building meaningful connections. Like that still applies to landlord partners. We still have to feel comfortable with them. They have to feel comfortable with us. It takes time to do it. And I've got to tell you, like, management agreements are slow to get over the line. It takes time. I can think of one example. It took us 2 years from initial conversation to actually signing the agreement. And then it's probably another 6 to 9 months once you're on site and you're doing the fit out. We've got something that, we've been in conversation now for 12 months. Like, it's a slow burn. You have to build that relationship. Everyone has to get comfortable. And so, it's in truth, it's easier to sign a lease. You've obviously got hurdles to overcome. And I know it's not easy to sign a lease, but it is easier to do it because you're telling a landlord, well, look, here's your rent and I'm going to take it from here. This is totally different. And you've got to build this partnership, but the upside for the landlord is huge, but you've got to educate, actually. That's the key thing, is educating our landlord partners. And I guess in the London market, perhaps that education piece is maybe slightly more advanced. 5 years ago, every conversation was like, okay, this is how it works. Now we get inbound inquiries saying, look, we want to do a management agreement. We want to find the right operator. They'll appoint an agent who will send out RFPs, and all that information's already gathered before we've even had started the conversation. So I guess that is a sign of kind of the advancement of the market. It's still small though, right? It's still a small percentage of what's going on across the market because it's hard. It is really hard to do these deals. And, for me, like, I try and do things simply in most things that I do. And actually those relationships are like, that's critical. And if it works, it's great. If you feel you're at loggerheads with the landlord from day one, the truth is it's probably not going to work. Like, you might get the deal over the line, but at some point it will come unstuck. And so, you've got to be selective on that basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been trying to do management agreements for 12 years. So Jonny, great. We're going to make it done. I want to follow in your footsteps at some point. We're hoping to anyway.
Well, some of it is team alignment too, right, Kane? Like, this is Jonny's model from the outset with his co-founder, and they were super clear, like, this is what we're doing, which I also think is slightly different. Like, when you're pursuing, you would do a lease, you would do a management agreement, you've got a CFO who maybe prefers one or the other, it's, I like the clarity. Jonny's got a lot of, it feels like, yes, I'm sure there's some messiness behind the scenes, but some clarity around the model and what you're pursuing. And it's pretty unique. I mean, it's incredible. The health tech space is really, really compelling and interesting.
Yeah. And
yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. And you've been very disciplined at only doing management deals, which I think is really interesting. If you look at the enterprise value perspective, right? When you look at the balance sheet of an operator that only has management agreements, I mean, it's entirely different. The risk profile of the business is entirely different. So like building that up and building a good portfolio with a great brand and goodwill with that brand, that has an opportunity to expand, there's tremendous value in that, right? Because now you've got this brand that is able to go out and execute on management agreements with a good track record, already with those relationships in place and that infrastructure. So, I mean, just access to capital, access to financing, all those things I think is amazing. And I think that a lot of capital sources, that's one of the things they're going to look for, like more asset light opportunities going forward. And I think you'll from a valuation perspective, you'll get rewarded for that.
Yeah, look, that's not the key driver of why we're doing it, but I think you're right. Like, it keeps things clean, it keeps things simple. I think when you sort of start to mix kind of leasing, as management agreements, ownership of assets, like, of course, like, it works, right? It's okay, it's fine, but it becomes a more complicated jigsaw, right? Actually, we've just been trying to keep this really focused, staying true to our kind of original vision. And that's been, that's challenging at times because you have to forego opportunities. We had certainly, like, I'd say 2021, 2022, there were some like crazily cheap lease deals that were available to us. And, we had long debates about whether
there was some temptation.
Yeah, of course there is. Of course there is. Yeah. Because if something's like 30% of market value in a good market, like, you're like, I mean, should we really do this? But actually, it takes a lot to stay disciplined, right? And stay focused. And frankly, I'm pleased we did, because, for all the reasons you highlighted, Kane, like, I think we're in a better position as a corporate entity for staying true to that and keeping things clean and simple.
Yeah.
I also want to mention really quickly, this must have come up on the office R&D session we did. Spacemade is a B Corp, which is also pretty incredible. There's not a lot of co-working space operators who have that designation. So I just wanted to mention that for anybody listening. Okay, Kane, I have one wrap-up question. Do you have one more before we get to the wrap-up question?
Yeah, one real quick one. Jonny, you white label all your sites. So this is interesting, Jamie. So you have 15 sites. Is that 15 different labels?
So it is, I would say 11 different, because a handful have the same, so it's same ownership. And so we've actually built within their portfolio kind of different sites that have a simple brand. But basically, yeah, everything does have its own brand and has its own identity. I guess the reason we did that day one was because when we set up the business, we could see that, like, as the market was maturing, so too were the users of space within the kind of co-working sector. And what we could see was that there was sort of some, I would say, like slightly more grown up businesses that were desperate to stay in flex, but they didn't necessarily want their brand to be secondary to the building brand, you know, so huge building brand, like outside. And then you kind of walk in and I don't know, you could be in a 200 person space, or you could be in a one man office. And so we were seeing that there's like, actually there was a need to kind of deliver something differently. So we built brands that work for the particular assets, because firstly, we want to target different markets for, you know, there's different products. Our space in where I'm sitting right now in Barbican on City Fringe, you know, actually has a different target market to our space in Leeds or our space in, you know, Putney, which is a suburb of London. They're all kind of quite different, and you want to speak to your consumer in a different way each time. So you build a brand, you design the space differently in order to accommodate that. But actually, I think probably what we learned when we started, we thought, okay, well, everything's going to have its own brand. Everything's going to have its own identity. We're going to build the platforms around each brand. Like, that's impossible. You know, building any brand is hard work, and it takes time and energy and effort. So what we really then did was create these individual brands, but kind of consolidate it under the Spacemade umbrella, which means we can push Spacemade as a kind of, you know, slightly more consumer facing brand. And we rebranded this year to do that. And Spacemade becomes the point at which people kind of enter. And then you've got these various different brands that might appeal based on, you know, the type of business you are, the type of location you're in, you know, type of price point that you might want to make. But it means that because we're doing very different types of products, we're not diluting that brand essence each time. So, you know, all our spaces are, you know, Beton by Spacemade, Elm Tree by Spacemade, you know, The Landing by Spacemade, and Spacemade is becoming more and more recognizable in the market, and that becomes the kind of, you know, this sort of that kind of quality assurance that sits underneath that building brand. And so, yeah, it's an interesting journey. Yeah, we've sort of deviated a little bit, but for the right reason, and enables us to do some really cool stuff with the Spacemade brand as well. Like, you know, a lot of London bus advertising. We do a lot of kind of outdoor advertising, and that stuff's fun. You know, that stuff's great, and it drives traffic, and we can do cool guerrilla marketing around Spacemade brand rather than having to do it across 15 different brands each time. So it's exciting, but you know, it evolves a little bit from where we were originally, but actually I think we've got the right balance between individual brand and Spacemade brand. Go on.
Okay, my wrap-up question. And I will say, if Gio was here, we would have gotten into all sorts of, you know, your personal origin story and family and all these things. So we'll have to have you back on
another time.
Gio,
I'll call Gio separately and just walking through it.
Totally. Okay, but my wrap-up question is, okay, you're at the GWA conference and it's karaoke time. What's your karaoke song?
Okay, I'm quite a big karaoke fan. So actually, I'll answer the question in a minute. My last Christmas party, I'm such a big karaoke fan, and there are a number within the Spacemade team that are big karaoke fans. I actually brought in what's called bandioke. I don't know if you've ever done this, but you do karaoke with a live band, and it was epic. It was brilliant. So actually, there I did a few songs. I would say my go-to song, and I'm going to sound quite British here, but probably my favorite band are the Arctic Monkeys. And they have a song called Mardy Bum, and I enjoy singing that, actually. So that was probably my go-to. If not, I'll probably go, you know, Killers, Mr. Brightside, which is always fun, but quite shouty. Yeah. What's yours? What's yours?
Well, Jonny, I have to tell you that like in business school, we had some event and they had a live band with karaoke. And it's the only time I've ever seen that. And it is one of my best memories still. This was a while ago. AC/DC, you get to sing, the band plays, you feel like a rock star for 3.5 minutes. It's amazing.
Super cool.
So good. So I didn't know like that was still a thing. I've never seen it since then. It was a bar in Chicago that did it. So
it's great.
Yeah.
I recommend it.
Kane, what's your song? I must have asked you this last time.
Yeah, I like Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting.
Oh, that's right.
Right, it's a weird song, but there's a Saturday, everybody kind of gets going, it's a fun one. But I haven't done with a band.
You're a crowd pleaser, Kane. Like
I try, He's trying to stop singing so that I could get the weight to someone else. That's the
Well, put the bandioki on your bucket list, Kane. It's worth it. Totally.
Amazing.
Okay, Jonny, thanks for doing this. I know it's a little late for you, so we appreciate you extending your day.
Not at all. It's been awesome to speak, and I've enjoyed it a lot. I was definitely ambushed by Kane being here, but what a pleasant surprise it was to see such a friendly face. And it's lovely to speak to you, Jamie. I really enjoy your podcast a lot. I think you add a lot of insight to the industry and kind of give a lot to operators and people interested in flex. So it's awesome to listen to, but it's a privilege to be on it as well. So thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Jonny.